Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and the rest of you. This is Jolly Scholar 888 with dispatch number 9. Central bank digital currencies, a fast lane to fascism? Global fascism, as a matter of fact. I'm recording again in my mobile man cave. I love recording here, partially because I like to smoke my cigar here. At any rate, here's what we're going to cover, and this is, again, I keep saying how important these dispatches have been of late, and they really are. And this one is going to be an eye-opener as well. So here's the trajectory. CBDCs. Now, most of you might not know what that is. It's central bank digital currencies. And what that poses to the control of our own financial independence is extreme. So we're going to look at that. The world adoption of CBDCs, which accelerates and makes it even worse. The national CBDCs will be bad enough. If we have a global one, it's going to be truly nefarious. So, what happens, what this poses to the control of our own financial independence? Then, of course, BlackRock enters crypto. That's got to be very bad news, right? For anyone that knows anything about BlackRock? Well, it is. And finally, will Ripple/XRP replace SWIFT, and why that could be so important for the world of global finance? We'll look briefly at what the SWIFT organization is, and then what is Ripple, the Ripple blockchain protocol and its token. And is it possible that Ripple will replace SWIFT? For those of you who already know something about SWIFT, you can see what an impact that could make on global finance. So, let's get started. Okay, so the first fellow we're going to look at is this rather innocuous looking fellow. He goes by the name Bitcoin Express. He's going to talk about the relationship between CBDCs and absolute control. And as you'll see, this is not his opinion. This is a stated objective of officials who are proposing national CBDCs. So, let's take a listen.
Central bank digital currencies will control your life. Where you live, what you eat, where you travel, everything. Absolute control. You might be looking at me thinking, who is this crazy conspiracy theorist? But don't take this from me. Take this directly from the head of the Bank for International Settlements. And fair warning, the clip we're about to watch, it's a bit disturbing.
For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
You heard it directly, absolute control. And the way this would work is that in a cashless society where a government digital currency is the primary form of payment, it is very simple for a government to block a transaction or freeze your money. You may be wondering, well, why don't we have this today? Don't we already have digital payments today? Most people pay through credit cards or mobile apps. Well, the thing about today is we live in a partition system. The way money works today is it's broken up into segments. If you have an issue or get locked out of one section, you can simply hop over to another section. We have the base layer of money, and on top of it, we have banking and mobile apps. So if a bank freezes your account or a mobile app kicks you off, you can very easily jump to a new bank or a new app that will accept you. And unfortunately, this does happen today. It may have even happened to some of you that are watching this video. It also recently happened to Andrew Tate, a very controversial viral sensation. He didn't do anything illegal, he didn't go to jail, but the people at the top didn't like what he was saying. So what they decided to do was ban him across several applications. And the clip we're about to watch, it might get you a bit angered, so my recommendation is to get some comfort food. And here is what Andrew Tate had to say.
Let me film my final message explaining how this is unfair and unjust. We filmed it, we produced it, we got it all edited within 12 hours, had it so ready to go, but we couldn't post it because of the YouTube strike. So we're waiting for the YouTube strike to expire. A few hours before the YouTube strike expires, guess what happens? They banned me from YouTube. Then they banned me from Discord. Then they banned me from Airbnb. They banned me from Stripe. I can't even remember. It was just emails coming in faster than you could believe. Ban.
So it wasn't just the socials.
Oh, no. The Matrix presses a button, my friend.
Yeah.
And every app on your phone stops working.
So they deleted him across multiple platforms, including banking apps as well. But he'll be okay. He has a lot of money, and also, as mentioned, we live in a partition system. You get locked out of one place, you can hop to another. But with a central bank digital currency, everything changes. As mentioned earlier, there's the base layer of money, and then we have these mobile and banking apps built on top of it. But with a CBDC, the base layer is a government-controlled central bank digital currency. So even if you get locked out of a bank or an app and hop over to a new one, well, the base layer can freeze your money. Central bank digital currencies, pretty dangerous. And when we look at them, most people see it as a very convenient, easy solution.
Now I'm sure you're beginning to see the problem. Okay, so as you can see, Bitcoin Express, he's young. He doesn't have a huge following. I mean, it's fairly large. It's 177,000, but this is a medium-sized influencer. Take Coin Bureau, who I've referred to a lot. He has 2.15 million. Nonetheless, his knowledge is extensive. Why is that? Well, I've pointed this out in the Crypto Wars videos and in the Blockchain and Metaverse videos. Because blockchain and cryptocurrency is such a threat to the international global financial system, they are all over Bitcoin. They are all over crypto in general. They're coming at crypto from every possible angle. And the main thing is that they realize they were slow at this. At first, they just dismissed it. They never saw it as a potential danger. And it took them a couple of years, well, a number of years, before they realized what a danger it actually poses to their monopoly of the global financial system. So now they know that they can't actually destroy it because it's not possible because of the nature of blockchain to simply make them go away, simply make them disappear. But little by little, you can make it so difficult for them to function. And we'll talk about that in some other videos. But the main thing is they can appropriate it. They can create their own digital currencies that are utterly centralized. And this is really nefarious. So let's listen a little bit more to him, and you'll see where we're going with this.
With a CBDC, everything can be tracked. And if a state or a government doesn't like what you're doing, they can freeze your money, they can block a transaction. And I'm not even talking about illegal activities. Maybe you went to a basketball game in public and you got drunk. Or maybe you cursed out your neighbor, and the authorities, they don't like that, so they punish you and they control the way you use your money. And now you can't get on a certain train, or maybe you can't eat at your favorite restaurant.
This is very similar to what happens in China, only they call it a social credit score. But this is how they implement it. We've already seen this in China. People will go to, they're going to buy a ticket to an airline, and they can't buy a ticket. Now, they can buy other things, but they can't buy a ticket. This is how granular this can be applied. And like he said, since they're tracking your money, they know where you go. They know that you have a favorite restaurant. So you said something that the authorities didn't like. They can implement something like, okay, as a punishment, you can't use your money. You can't go to that restaurant because you can't spend your money there, just at that restaurant. Do you see how granular this can get? And so it's not an exaggeration to say it's absolute control. It's absolute control of your ability to function in the society. Social credit score.
In China are nearing cashless societies. The primary form of payment is digital, with popular apps such as WeChat and Alipay. And if you can control someone's money, you control their life. More than half of the countries in the world are working on CBDCs, and it'll likely grow over time. I'm over here on the Atlantic Council CBDC tracker, and it shows all the countries around the world and where they are currently standing when it comes to CBDCs.
Now you can see that this is not an exaggeration. If this goes into place, you will never have financial freedom again, of any kind. This is not an exaggeration. This is not science fiction. This is happening right now before our eyes. Okay, so we could see that The original purpose of cryptocurrency was in fact to replace the financial system, not become a part of it and not become appropriated. Okay, so let's look now at a positive spin on the CBDCs by people who want to promote it. And this organization is called Hedera. So you read right here, CBDCs explained. Cryptocurrencies as we know them today are extremely volatile and lack government backing. Well, that's the whole point, right? CBDCs overcome these concerns while using the same underlying distributed ledger, that is blockchain, technology of cryptocurrencies. Governments recognize CBDCs as legal tender in the issuing of central banks jurisdiction, meaning anyone can use them for payments and every merchant must accept them. So that sounds reasonable, right? So why issue CBDCs? If a country issues CBDCs, its government will consider it to be the legal tender, just like fiat currencies. Both CBDC and physical cash would be legally acknowledgeable as a form of payment and as an act as a claim of the central bank government. So this sounds convenient and it sounds reasonable until you understand what that really means, as explained by, for instance, Bitcoin Express. They're not going to talk about any of those downsides. In fact, they're not going to talk about the real purpose, which is absolute control. They're going to sell it as convenience. So what they're doing here, and they're acknowledging it, is they're taking cryptocurrency technology, the blockchain technology, and appropriating it. And this is very bad news. A small channel called Crypto Buzz, only 1.6 thousand subscribers. I chose this one because they cover an interview that Edward Snowden gave. Now, I'm assuming you know who Edward Snowden is, and they're not interviewing him themselves, but they're covering an interview that he gave and putting it into context. And I think it's quite good.
Edward Snowden, a well-known whistleblower and the head of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, believes that cryptocurrencies have more value in their usage than in their financial potential. One of the most important points here is what Edward Snowden has an opinion about. So let's discuss in detail. On October 9th, Edward Snowden, a whistleblower and privacy advocate, wrote an opinion column on central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, in which he said CBDCs are the newest risk cresting the public horizon. Rather than being an innovation, CBDCs are closer to becoming a perversion of cryptocurrencies and crypto-fascist money, according to Snowden. CBDC has been dubbed a perversion of cryptocurrencies and a crypto-fascist currency by a prominent U.S. whistleblower.
Totally agree.
Because it has the ability to offer states a huge amount of power while restricting people's rights. In a statement titled, "Your Cash and Your Life," Edward Snowden.
Now you can see, Snowden is very much for financial freedom, freedom of information, etc. And he's paid a pretty heavy price for it. Regardless of what you think about him, that is the position that he's coming from. And he makes no bones about it. It's a move towards fascism. And this is clear to anybody who looks into it.
Snowden said he wants to question members of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, and the U.S. government on whether money should be consolidated by the government. Can it really be his money out of all the things that could be centralized and controlled in this poor man's life?
So Snowden is saying it very clearly, and we're all seeing it very clearly. The state is at the center of every exchange. This means not large exchanges, but every minute exchange, which in fact means that you don't own your money.
People make a living through their labor, which may be enough to retire, or, if not, can he ever expect to rely on the state's benign or even appropriate provision for his well-being, his care, his healing, says Snowden.
So he's talking about socialism, fascism. Can we rely on the state? Well, this is against every principle of the foundations of America, the United States of America. That's precisely what you don't want to be in charge of your life, that you don't want to be dependent upon. So in this way, Snowden, regardless of what some people think about him, is a quintessential American, which is funny because he can't come back to America. Rather ironic. Well, that's not really quite the right word, is it? Now we come to a fellow named Sheldon Evans. He has a pretty good following, 736,000. It's not bad. About the same level as Crypto Buzz. And this is one of the best exposés on BlackRock I've come across. So let's take a listen. Let me see if I
Who do
can,
you
if I can do
really
this.
think owns the world? That's a question that might get many different answers depending on who you ask, but there's one thing for sure. One company controls most of the world's wealth. The Federal Reserve, presidents, and world banks all have this company on speed dial. And you know what else? Not only did you put them there, but they're using your own money against you. That company is BlackRock. And they've been handed the world on a silver platter. A company that would rather remain unheard of and in the shadows. It's a company that hides in plain sight, yet nearly nobody has ever heard of it until recently. It owns a piece of everything, yet claims to own nothing. It's coming for your dream home, and now it's even coming for your crypto. Founded in 1988, BlackRock is an absolutely colossal asset management company. In the 30 years since, they've become the largest asset manager in the world, controlling more than $10 trillion globally. To put that in perspective that you might be more familiar with if you watch this channel, the entire crypto market is currently worth less than 1/10 of what the single asset manager controls. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, as the roots run deep and impact every single aspect of your life. You can't eat, sleep, drive, or even enjoy a walk in the park without BlackRock having some part in it. I'll discuss the hidden secrets of their influence much later in the video, but for now, buckle up, because you're about to find out how they own all you see, yet nothing at the same time. To be honest, they own...
Now, see, this sounds exaggerate, right? But for those of us who have been following crypto, and again, I knew nothing about BlackRock, I knew nothing about CBDCs, but also I didn't know a lot of what was going on politically and financially around the world. Once you've looked at enough sources and enough content, this is just one more fellow. He just happens to be putting this, I think he's stating the case very well, and that's why I'm using him. However, this is common knowledge now for a lot of people. And again, this is an advantage of following crypto. You learn so much about the world because the crypto sector has to know these things. So let's continue.
A bit of everything. If you put up the chart of all the world's largest companies, closed your eyes and threw a dart, chances are you'll land on a company that BlackRock owns shares in. Think of any large business, bank, or industry. ExxonMobil, Apple, Bank of America. BlackRock owns at least 6% in each of these. There are thousands of global companies that they have a stake in. And while this is really higher than 6%,
that's
owning
a lot.
that much of companies that size amounts to billions of dollars per holding that makes them one of the largest shareholders in each of them. But if they own so much, surely they're worth a lot as a company, right? Well, not exactly. BlackRock is only worth about $98 billion. But they own 6% of Apple, right? That's around $145 billion in share value alone. And that's just one of the many companies that they hold. Well, this is how. BlackRock, as an asset manager, invests and holds assets on behalf of their clients. These can be companies, other institutions, or private investors. This could be cash, mortgages, shares, or even your own pension. There's a good...
You see what's so insidious about this? They're using your money. This is the world of high finance. These people produce nothing. They do this with your money, my money, everybody else's money. Furthermore, BlackRock is the company, is the entity that is forcing ESG on everybody. And the way they do this is by strangling them. They deny them credit. You're going to see how this works. The ESG scam, the ESG racket, is in fact BlackRock.
Good chance that right now your pension is being invested in a company that BlackRock either controls or has a significant stake in, effectively giving BlackRock control of your pension. If you invest in companies yourself, most of the time you'll find BlackRock on the shareholder list. You'd have to look very hard to find a company that is untouched by their influence. They invest in every market on every continent and in almost every asset class. Let's take a look at the man in control. What if I told you the person who runs BlackRock today was once disgraced and shunned in the financial world for losing his bank over $100 million? That might be surprising. How could someone who messed up that bad ever work in the industry again, let alone as chairman of the world's largest asset management fund? Well, it's true, and that man is called Larry Fink. In the early 80s, Fink helped pioneer mortgage-backed securities while working at First Boston. The guy running BlackRock, which owns a large chunk of the world, is the same guy that helped create the cause of the 2008 financial crisis. And it gets even better. Guess who the Fed, the banks, and the US government all asked for help and advice during that crisis was? Like, which companies to save and which companies to abandon? Think. Think hard.
So you see, BlackRock uses your money, and then the government goes to them because they're beholden to them, because they caused the financial crisis. They caused the financial crisis, and then the government goes to them for advice. And what kind of advice do they give them? They give them the advice to save and bail out companies that they're heavily invested in or that are following the ESG protocols that they implemented. This is how they gain control of larger and larger sections of the economy. What is ESG? We could devote an entire video to this insidious racket, but for now, here's what you need to know in order to follow this discussion. ESG stands for Environment, Social, Governance. What BlackRock has done is create a set of objectives and protocols that every company that wants to have access to capital must adhere to. And that's because they control most of the world's capital. The environment racket is how they start the shakedown. They tell a company that their carbon footprint is too large. So for the sake of the environment, of course, they must submit to the environmental standards BlackRock imposes, or else they will not qualify for any more funding. Their access to capital will be limited or cut off altogether. Furthermore, the company must be politically correct in its public image and only support the causes BlackRock declares are just. This is the S, or social component. It is the corporate equivalent of the social credit score, like what they impose upon the Chinese public. And it's called their ESG rating. The G for governance means that the company must create the administrative infrastructure to carry out the environmental and social objectives. They do this by establishing positions within the hierarchy that will direct and administrate the ESG objectives. In essence, this is the equivalent of taking on and paying for political commissars and their staffs to make sure that the targeted companies follow the directives set by BlackRock. Every company is now a political activist organization, as well as a business, working for the global socialist elites and their agenda. State-controlled capitalism, communist fascism, plain and simple. Those companies that refuse to bend the knee are financially suffocated. But by owning very little, they have virtually no liability. But by owning indirectly enough of every major company, they can control vast sectors of the economy. What they don't control, they financially suffocate into submission. It's really nefarious.
In 1988, he co-founded BlackRock with a credit line of just $5 million. And with that new company came a new financial model designed by Larry. That was called Aladdin. Aladdin is BlackRock's own black box, the beating heart of the global financial risk management system. It's an AI portfolio management software developed in 1988 alongside BlackRock's foundation, and its rather creative name stands for Asset Liability and Debt and Derivative Investment Network. And it sounds kind of catchy. It does exactly what it says in the box. Over decades, this AI has been fed data and models used to evaluate and predict the risk of every outcome in the financial system. Think of it like the Borg from Star Trek. The Borg co-opt technology and knowledge from other alien species and feed it to the hive mind. The more it absorbs, the smarter it gets. Although that's probably not a reassuring thought. So you give it a load of data on 1,000 mortgages, and it'll tell you which are most likely to default, how their value affects the set, and applies risk scores to each one. The exact same risk scores you and I get when applying for credit. In the end, this system is developed and controlled by BlackRock and all the major competitors that use it. Today, Aladdin is directly involved with the management or trading of 50% of all ETFs, 17% of all bonds, and over 10% of all stocks traded worldwide. That's $21 trillion of value controlled and managed by a single AI. That means an AI controls more wealth than the entire GDP of the USA.
You can see this is rather phenomenal.
BlackRock, seemingly unsatisfied with owning just our natural world, has decided it wants to own our digital world too. The planet's largest asset manager has officially moved into crypto.
That's great news, right? Excellent.
Month, Coinbase agreed to a deal with BlackRock to open its data doors to the Aladdin platform, allowing institutional investors to directly add Bitcoin to their portfolio.
Now, I've brought up Coinbase before, that I use Coinbase because it's convenient, but I didn't like its centralization. And now I'm going to get out of it for sure, knowing that BlackRock is now invested in it. This is going to be really problematic for Coinbase. Well, not really. It's going to be very good for them. Furthermore, if you're invested in Bitcoin, this is another guarantee that it's going to skyrocket soon. unless BlackRock uses its leverage to actually destroy Bitcoin, which I doubt they're going to do. It's too useful.
Only time will tell how much of an impact this will have on the crypto market as a whole, and as beneficial to prices as institutional investment can be, the core essence of crypto is decentralization. So I can understand people being worried about a monolithic shadow bank expanding its control into the crypto market.
Well, we're going to see shortly that since this video was produced, BlackRock has done exactly that. They're now investing in all of the altcoins, and we'll get to that shortly.
BlackRock wins because they hold majority stake. Now, of course, this is just speculation that the faceless institutions will one day hold.
Now, what he meant by majority stake is also that they own majority of the staking. When you move from proof of work to proof of stake, which is something I've covered in my blockchain to metaverse videos, and it's too complicated to explain here. But the trouble with proof of stake is that, in fact, they buy the native token, say Ethereum. They'll invest in Ethereum and they'll hold it in order to have the right to run one of the nodes. And it's a complex system, but the problem is that unlike proof of work, which investing in really doesn't enhance your position as far as manipulating Bitcoin, because it can't be manipulated, it's not clear that investing in staking, first of all, it does give you a voice in the governance. And if enough large entities buy up all the staking nodes, then you can see that this could be real problems. We'll see how this works out for Ethereum, because Ethereum today has just transitioned into proof of stake from proof of work. Again, this may sound a little bit cryptic to you, but if you watch my early videos in Blockchain to Metaverse, it will make sense.
Luckily for now, it's only Bitcoin, but they've said they're coming for other tokens soon, especially considering their new ESG narrative. BlackRock is known for operating behind the curtain, but they may have overplayed their hand recently.
Now, you see what we mean by the ESG. It's ESG that forced many cryptocurrencies to move from proof of work into proof of stake. So now they're more vulnerable to the control by massive investors, where Bitcoin is not. Ethereum is the first great transition from proof of work to proof of stake. And we're hoping for the best, but as he's pointing out, it could now be manipulated.
There's a common misconception that as an asset management company, BlackRock and its shareholders don't own much, that their clients do, and that BlackRock only manages it on their behalf, acting as a passive investor and doing what is in the best interest of their shareholders. This was perhaps how it used to act until 2018. You see, Larry Fink writes an annual public letter to CEOs, which generally talks about overall trends and goals. However, in 2018, he penned a letter which caused a huge backlash. Contribute to society or risk losing our support. This is what it stated.
Now, this is exactly what I've been pointing out. What they mean by lose our support is that they will suffocate them. It's clearly a threat. They'll deny investment to the companies. They can't borrow money. So this is a threat. And the ESG, as I pointed out, racket is how they do it. Because to the public, it looks like, oh, they're looking after the planet, right? That's how they're slowly shutting down proof of work. It's under the excuse that it uses up too much energy, which is a farce. It does not. At any rate, I don't want to digress too much.
And it's pretty blunt. For a company that grew considerably by investing in the fossil fuel sector, many CEOs and the general public saw this as a direct overstepping of power by a large, unelected corporate figure. And that.
No, they're not overstepping. It's a strategy. It was a strategy from the beginning. As we're going to see, they're now cooperating with China. But I would argue that was always the goal. The petroleum and coal industries are simply moving away from the West. That's deliberate. It's not that we're making or digging less coal. It's not that we're burning less coal. It's not that we're producing less coal. That's not happening. We in the West are producing less coal. But China is the largest coal producer in the world. It's continuing to produce coal, and they burn more coal than anyone else. So all we're doing is shifting a certain industry out of the West and into China, basically China. Russia's not on board with this, and that's why they're all attacking Russia.
That's understandable. It's definitely a change of tune from going from a profit at any cost policy to championing the ESG scores of what they now deem as troubling industries.
Again, I have to stop here for a second. I really like what Evans is doing. He's doing a great job. He's really thorough, but he's a little bit naive. They are not changing their tune at all. They're deliberately strategizing to move these industries out of the West, to impoverish the West, because the West has too large of a middle class. And the people in the West are still too individualistic, maybe, especially in America. They're trying to cripple the West deliberately. So when he says that they used to invest in petroleum products and in the oil and coal industry, and now they're not changing. They didn't change that. Using ESG as a battering ram, as a cudgel to beat up Western companies, they've simply forced them into submission or forced them out of business, and then sent that same business to China. It's a strategy. It's not some kind of turn of events. And when he says they used to think in a different manner, but now they've changed their mind and now they're conforming to ESG, that's a total, I'm sorry, he's just getting it wrong. BlackRock is the company that invented ESG. They invented it, they strategized it, and they deployed it. It's a weapon. It's a racket.
BlackRock essentially told the world was that for companies to comply with their ESG demands or find themselves across the table from a very powerful opponent with board voting rights. This wasn't just a casual warning. It was a threat. In 2021,
Exactly. And they get them from both ends. They don't supply them with money. They cut off their funding. They cut off their ability to get loans. And also, they have infiltrated the companies by placing people into the board of directors. So this is how they put their own board members on the board to vote the way they want them to vote.
BlackRock used its influence again and voted to back 3 candidates to the Exxon board, who were in favor of a more environmentally friendly approach to Exxon's future. BlackRock then used the same voting power against a different oil producer, but this time its target was in Australia, to oppose a director that they felt wasn't doing enough to support responsible emission targets at Woodside Petroleum. They take their ESG principles very seriously, it seems. Serious enough to block potential financial returns and stability in companies to achieve their goals.
Again, I don't want to overstate this or beat the guy up with it. They take it very seriously. It's not a moral consciousness. They take it very seriously because they invented it. They developed it deliberately for this purpose. It was a strategy from the beginning.
These are just a couple examples where BlackRock has directly or indirectly used its huge voting power to get its way in different companies and industries around the world. With this much control and influence, the question needs to be asked: is it right for one company to have this much power? And what happens if it gets into the wrong hands?
Again, I think he's being a little bit innocent. When he says it gets into the wrong hands, it is in the wrong hands. They are the wrong hands. They developed the strategy deliberately. It could get into the hands of anybody worse. Global fascism is exactly what they're deploying. It's a strategy. It's not a change of heart. It's not accidental, like an unintended consequence. This is the consequence that they intend. So they are the bad actor that he's suggesting might take over the artificial intelligence that is Aladdin. Does it really work? Well, we don't really know that it's working. We just know that the people using it think it works really well. And by the time they figure out that it doesn't, it'll be just like what happened in the derivatives market. There'll be a huge crash, and they'll come in to pick up the pieces.
That if Aladdin were to ever go offline, the world would be plunged into a stone age of financial chaos, with banks and investment firms turned upside down worldwide. But what if, instead of a system failure, a bad actor got control of BlackRock systems?
They are the bad actors.
Or simply by organizational control or political pressure. If someone with less than neutral intentions got the keys to Aladdin, they could call...
Again, I hate to... Look, less than neutral intentions. There are no neutral intentions here. This is deliberate. This is strategy. It's It's what the financial institutions used to do with inflation, only now they have a much more powerful tool. This is deliberate, and they will eradicate the middle class in the West in the process, and that's also deliberate.
If a government or an individual with a specific agenda gained control of BlackRock,
they have a specific agenda.
Across borders without much difficulty. Of course, you could say that Larry Fink already fills this role, pushing their ESG agenda.
Thank you.
It could be much, much worse.
Thank you. No,
so when you own the world...
Now, it couldn't be much, much worse. He's as bad as it gets. The guy is a global fascist. I don't understand how this fellow hasn't figured that out, but...
Back in 2016, BlackRock became the first US company to achieve a foreign institutional investor license to operate in China. At this time, this was unprecedented and sent shockwaves throughout the global markets and geopolitical discussion. How had a US company like BlackRock, so entrenched in the Western capitalist ideals, gained the favor of the Chinese state?
Because they are not entrenched in the capitalist ideals. That's the whole point. They are entrenched in the ideals of Communist China, global fascism. I've pointed this out, that China is a national socialist country. It may say communist without saying nationalist. I've also pointed out all communism, all socialism manifests as fascism. It manifests in China as National Socialism, which is just a slight variation from fascism. Therefore, China is never going to go along with any of the immigration policies or any of the other policies that are being deployed disastrously upon the West. Never. They won't allow that because they are for the Han. They are for the Chinese. So why is Fink on board with this? This will be the subject of another video when we talk about immigration. Again, what I'm saying here is that from the beginning, this was the strategy. It's not a turn of events. It's only shocking to us. But if you understand what BlackRock is doing, it's perfectly consonant. It's their project. Of course they're going to align themselves with China because China is a socialist country. The conflict will become whether China insists on their national socialism, which they will. And that eventually will become a problem with even people like BlackRock.
While it might not own the world itself, BlackRock definitely seems to act like it does. Maybe the only way to regain any of the control would be if everyone withdrew their investments from BlackRock at the same time, leaving them...
Well, there are movements to do exactly that. And I'll cover that in another video. There's a number of organizations now fighting BlackRock and doing exactly that, withdrawing their investments in BlackRock. But again, I like this guy. He's being a little bit naive. BlackRock is the bad actor. BlackRock is doing exactly what it planned from the beginning, and that's Larry Fink. Is Larry Fink just one person? No, no way. He represents something very nefarious that's been operating in the world really for quite a while. So with that, I'm going to leave Mr. Evans, and again, bravo. I think this is an excellent expose that he's done. I think he's a bit naive on certain points, but he has laid out the problem of BlackRock beautifully. At this point, he's trying to realize that control of the world's complete financial system into a global network that is socialist and fascist is not an exaggeration, and it's not really an opinion. It's happening right in front of you. All you have to do is look at it. So now we're going to take a look at a fellow named BItBoy, a person that I've brought up before because he did an excellent expose on the World Economic Forum. So, first of all, we have to look at what SWIFT is. It's the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. That's what he's referring to when he talks about SWIFT. Let's take a look at what SWIFT does. SWIFT enables money transfers between nations and currencies. It is highly centralized and for all practical purposes an extension of the global financial system. Most banks around the world are members of the SWIFT system, especially in the West. It can lock users out at will as it did with Russia early in the current war. Now, Ripple is a real-time gross settlement system, currency exchange and remittance network created by Ripple Labs, Inc., a US-based technology company. Released in 2012, Ripple is built upon a distributed, open-source protocol and supports tokens representing fiat currency, cryptocurrency, commodities, and other units of value, such as frequent flyer miles or mobile minutes. Ripple purports to enable, quote, secure and instantly nearly free global financial transactions of any size with no chargebacks, unquote. The ledger employs the native cryptocurrency known as XRP. In December 2020, Ripple Labs and two of its executives were sued by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for selling XRP tokens, which the SEC classified as unregistered securities. Now, the difference between securities and commodities is interesting. They overlap, so it's not really clear. In one of my last videos, you saw Mr. O'Leary talking about that he welcomes certain regulations because they would clarify these distinctions, especially in relation to cryptocurrencies. I'm not sure that the crypto world needs to have any of these clarifications. We should just be able to function on our own. Again, the purpose of cryptocurrency is to replace the financial system, not become part of it. However, that may be an extreme position. So let's take a look at what BitBoy has to say on this.
This is something that Swift can use temporarily to remain in front of Ripple if this works for them. But people don't understand how much RippleNet is built out. They don't understand the full depth of that system and how useful it is for banks. And because of that, they'll say, oh, see, Swift is going to win now. No, that's not how this is going to work. Swift doesn't have a prayer against Ripple. It doesn't have a prayer. It is an information network versus a value network. There's literally no way a network of information can be more efficient than a network of value because there's no middle steps. The transfer is the transfer. They are still working on an old system to where, yes, they can integrate different CBDC networks the same way that they could integrate different fiat currencies, but someone still has to go on the back end and do all the sending. That's of a cross-border transaction. Briefly, how this works, if I'm in Mexico, I want to send money to Germany, I go to my bank in Germany, and I say, hey, I go to my bank in Mexico and say, I want to send this over to Germany. They convert it to US dollars, then they send the money first via information. Later, they actually send the money through a wire, like 7 days later. The German bank gets it, converts it from dollars into German mark, or euro, the euro actually, no, into the euro, and then gives that to whoever needs it. It's an archaic process when we have digital currency. A CBDC is going to be the same thing. They're still going to have to convert the CBDCs over to US dollars before they can send the transfers because their systems are not set up to be able to convert all of these different currencies in an easy way in real time. So that's why, basically Swift has no prayer against Ripple.
Okay, so he's simply focusing on the fact that he believes Swift, the old system, even though they're trying to adapt to the new CBDCs, which are, as Swift and everybody else is seeing, are inevitable. CBDCs are going to be first national and then international, and eventually there probably will be a global CBDC. That I'm convinced of that, and a lot of people are. That's the ultimate objective, and will totally eliminate national financial systems completely. So the question here is it a good thing that XRP will knock out Swift? That depends on whether or not Ripple XRP remains a decentralized system. Because if it does, it will make it far more difficult for a centralized global entity to manipulate the CBDCs of the world, and much less form a global CBDC that everybody will have to conform to. However, it doesn't really look like it's going to be an advantage. It could be that this protocol will actually facilitate not only the implementation of national CBDCs, but the eventual emergence of a global CBDC. And our whole position on this, as Snowden said very eloquently, is financial fascism. We have always had certain reservations about Ripple, even though many of the crypto community were championing Ripple to the extent that they were hoping that Ripple will win this suit with the SEC, and it's going pretty well for them. So regardless of whether or not Ripple wins this lawsuit, that's basically going to simply determine will all cryptocurrencies fall under the SEC or fall under commodities? Again, many of us are saying we don't care because we don't want to be regulated by either one. The commodities exchange is a little bit easier to deal with than the SEC, but in the end, it's still regulations. And the purpose of cryptocurrencies is to replace the financial system, not become a part of it, much less facilitate the advent of a global or even national CBDCs. Nonetheless, how does this look for the financial world and the emergence of financial fascism? Well, I don't think it looks very good, however this turns out, whether Ripple replaces SWIFT or not. Something would have to be embedded into the protocols of Ripple to avoid this kind of total minute control of everybody's money so that people don't own anything. And again, that's completely against the foundations of cryptocurrency, is that you do own not only your assets, but you own a part of the entire system. The opposite of fiat, where you own nothing of the system whatsoever, and even your money is manipulated. So we'll have to see. All right, so let's do the conclusions now. First, let's make the basic statement. The objective of crypto, starting with Bitcoin, was to replace the financial system, not to contribute to it. Ownership. If you don't own your own assets, you don't own yourself. Now, this is something that our founding fathers understood. That's why they put such a premium on private property. And it's why the communists and socialists attack it. Because if you look at the philosophy underlying it, and I don't have the time to do this here, though I probably will do a video on this subject. Once you start looking into it, you cannot help but come to the conclusion that our ancestors understood. If you own nothing, you don't own yourself. You have no agency in the world. Owning a piece of the financial system is a hugely empowering move that cryptocurrency is trying to achieve. The globalists are now fully aware of the danger cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies pose to them. They, and by they I mean the globalists with BlackRock as their financial engine empowering them, are moving very quickly to dominate the threat and incorporate the crypto technologies and to actually reinforce their control. They now see the threat as an opportunity. The crypto wars have now been vastly accelerated. There is much less time. We have to fight the globalists at every possible front. I'm not being exaggerated and I'm not being quixotic. If you've paid attention to this and you look around at the world, you're going to have to come to the conclusion that, as Snowden put it, financial fascism is in the making. And cryptocurrency can resist it, could resist it, can resist it, but if it is appropriated and those technologies are then deployed by the globalists, it'll actually facilitate global fascism. So again, I say, and again, I don't mean to be overly quixotic, romantic, but we must fight the globalists at every possible front. The first act of resistance that we can take is to keep crypto unregulated. If that means we pull out of the financial system and create our own cryptocurrencies and protect them by whatever means we can, then we need to do that. Again, this is part of what I'm developing with my theory and concept of techno-anarchism. Sounds romantic, I know. At any rate, the first act of resistance that we can take is to keep crypto unregulated. And more pertinent to this discussion, if we can vote on it, vote against anything that has to do with implementing a national CBDC, a national centralized banking digital currency. I doubt they'll ever put that up to a vote. They're not going to ask us peasants on that. But if we can stop it legislatively, that would be a great first step. Do not allow the United States to ever deploy a CBDC.